distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, friends and enemies.
Okay, so welcome to this week's episode of Make It Plain. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Please do like and subscribe. We're doing a special series of What Would Malcolm Say to coincide with 100 years this year of Malcolm being born. Also 60 years since he died. Also have a book, Nobody Can Give You Freedom. That's out in the UK now and out in September in the US. And we also made a film, same name, Nobody Can Give You Freedom. You can watch that film on this YouTube channel entirely for free, where I went to the UK, talked to my parents, talked to people like George the Poet, went over to America, spoke to Dr. Ilyasha Shabazz, Malcolm's third daughter, Dr. Jared A. Bull, number of people around Malcolm X and what he means. And so what we've done, this special series of What Will Malcolm Say, is the full interviews from people who were in the documentary. So last week, we had Dr. Ilyasha Shabazz on week one, Malcolm's third daughter. I did a bit of intro. What would Malcolm say? Last week we did I Told You So, because that is what Malcolm would say about where we are today. And then ran the full interview. It's a pleasure to be at the Malcolm X and Dr. Betty Shabazz Educational and Memorial Center up in Harlem, talking to Dr. Ilyasha Shabazz. So please do watch that from last week. This week, we're going to run the interview with George the Poet. So I interviewed George the Poet actually at the London School of Economics. That was in the Old Theatre, which was the place where Malcolm gave one of his last ever international speeches. He was in the UK and he was in London just 11 days before he died. He was in Smethwick in Birmingham, where I live, just 9 days before he died. And in that interview with George, we really spoke about the international impact of Malcolm, what did Malcolm think about international politics, why he was so important, not just an American figure. Even the idea of what does it mean to be American is deeply misunderstood. But with the George the Poet angle was very much about the international experiences, etc. So I'm going to run, after the break, we're going to run the whole of that interview. We've had George on the podcast before. You'll see he was one of last season. I think it was the first episode of last season we had George on. He has a great book called Track Record. If you don't know, George is a spoken word artist who does really, 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 really excellent work, has a podcast. But have you heard George's podcast on BBC Sounds? Someone you should definitely check out. Now, as always, you've come to know Make It Plain by now. You do get a little bit of a rant from me. And for this What Would Malcolm Say rant, I'm trying to think, Malcolm was alive. And again, stress, who knows what Malcolm would say if he's actually alive, but given the body of work we have of Malcolm, how do we understand the world using that framework that Malcolm gave us, which is a really important framework and a really clear framework once you really get into his work. That's what all of the book has been about, all of the film has been about, etc., etc., etc. And it has been a while since, like, last week was the first time I potted for a long time. So I'm catching up with some things that have happened, and I'm trying to think what are the questions. So I've been doing the tour because the book Nobody Can Give You Freedom came out in May, and so I've been going around lots of different events, showing the film, been up and down, lots of questions about, and I'm trying to think what are the questions that people have been asking me, and one of them comes up, I think, every time. Definitely every time. This question has come up every single event. So I thought, let's do this on the pod. Because obviously something is a burning question, and again, I haven't really been able to pod about this because I haven't been really talking for a bit. We had a bit of a break, and so the break was to do the documentary. That documentary took so much time, and the book and everything. Oh, I love doing it. Very, very, very time intensive. So the question is all about Ibrahim Traore. Every time I go, anywhere I go, someone's asking me about what do you think about Ibrahim Traore? What will Malcolm say about Ibrahim Traore? Now, really obvious. There's an obvious answer to this straight up the top. Ibrahim Traore, if you don't know, has taken power in Burkina Faso. There's many kind of, and he does this on purpose, right? There's some alludes to the history of Burkina Faso and Thomas Sankara. So Thomas Sankara, military coup in the 80s, took over the country, talked about Pan-Africanism, wanted to do, was talking about getting rid of the colonizers, etc., etc. And Thomas Sankara is a big figure in revolutionary Pan-Africanism. And Traore is in those footsteps and is alluding to it, right? Dresses the same, has some of the same rhetoric. It's not an accident, right? And certainly, if you think about Malcolm's politics, what was Malcolm doing the last year of his life? He was traveling the African continent, right? Started the Organization of Afro-American Unity, and purposely did that to connect to the Organization of African Unity, and was working with, saw the potential in revolutionary African leaders, people like Nkrumah, like Sekou Toure, people even like Nasser in Egypt, like said, look, there's a body of African leaders who are coming through and want to challenge the West. So Malcolm seeing Toure now saying, look, this is a positive development, right? Somebody's coming through, challenging the West. I purposely wore my Lumumba t-shirt today because if you listen to any of Malcolm's speeches from 60s on, like Lumumba's massively features. Lumumba's the first prime minister of the Congo, and what he wanted to take Congo, really wanted to take Congo out of the sphere of influence of Europe, was talking about Pan-Africanism and got himself killed, obviously, because that's what happens when you talk about Pan-Africanism, you get yourself killed or deposed or something happens to you, right? So clearly, if you think about Malcolm's politics, there is a very, very clear thing that says, look, we have to link into those African countries are revolutionary, those countries are talking about Pan-Africanism, and that is a mechanism through which we can develop. 100%. So there's no doubt, and especially now. I mean, back in Malcolm's time, there was a slew, there was a number of African leaders at least saying the right thing, right? At least saying the right thing. Nyerere down in Tanzania, there was people saying the right thing at least. And what's happened since is Malcolm will be so Malcolm will be so depressed and upset about what has happened since, because when Malcolm was alive, the OAU, it certainly had reactionary people in it. Like, for example, the leader of the Congo who killed Lumumba, Moise Tshombe, was part of the people who sat down to formalize the African Organization African Unity. But there were also, you had these revolutionary leaders, right? The Nkrumahs of the world. And so there was a real potential. Pan-Africanism, when Malcolm was alive, was a real possible thing, right? You had leaders who were talking the talk. You had the initiative to do it. It was a possibility, right? And really, one of the major things that's happened, one of the major things that's changed over the last 60 years since Malcolm passed away, is that possibility has disappeared. You look at the leaders on the African continent today, it's no. I mean, Traore stands out because he's kind of the only one, right? The leader of Ghana who came out and talking about getting rid of chocolate companies. But generally speaking, you got Traore, you got people in the leader of Mali, so the Sahel region is a large region, but Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger are all kind of pushing back, particularly against French, leaving things like the ECOWAS, which is the Economic Union of West African States, a neo-colonial union of West African states, are actually saying let's band together. Outside of that, I don't know what you've got on the African continent. It really, one of the ways, probably the main way that neocolonialism has been, and neocolonialism just means new colonialism, right? The new form of colonialism, what Malcolm called the benevolent colonialism, the American-led empire. One of the main ways they've managed to continue that is by deposing, killing, getting rid of the revolutionary African leaders and replacing them with these puppets, right? And even people like, who at one point seemed revolutionary, people like, Nyerere is a good example down in Tanzania, talk about African socialism. But once you stay in power for 20, 30 years, you just tend to dissolve into something else, right? And so, in fact, in the book, actually, one of the things I do criticize Malcolm is the wrong word, but like, there's some areas where Malcolm was incorrect. And this is one of those areas, right? Organization of African Unity was never going to be the thing, because within the Organization of African Unity, because they had the Shombis and they had the reactionaries around the table, they agreed that the organization couldn't interfere within nation states. So you're keeping these nation states. Remember, all of these nation states are made up by Europe. Burkina Faso isn't actually a country. It's a country only because the French said it was a country. Nigeria is only a country because Britain said it's a country. Like, they literally sat down and carved these up. And so once you have these countries created, that's how we are controlled. That's how you maintain control. And so the idea that you have these individual countries are ever going to be able to work collectively as a unit, it was always done. And it was done in the Organization of African Unity when they agreed you couldn't interfere with the states. And that really was it. And that was actually 62, 63. So Malcolm should have known this. And I say this right now, that that's something you can foresee, but you had the potential, you had the possibility. And I think one of the things that's really shifted in the 60 years is we've seen that's a dead end. People get happy in their countries, people get comfortable in their countries, and then it falls apart. You can't have, like, there was always this idea, I think it was Cabral, I want to say Amilcar Cabral in Guinea, who talked about the idea of national liberation and then continental liberation. problem is when you have national anything, you get stuck in national. And this tends to be the case all of the time. Right? So there's this, so Traore stands out now, and people are so happy about Traore because he's one of the few, like one of the really, really few, who's coming out and saying no, no to the West, no to neocolonialism, no, no, no. So this is a good thing. Has to be a good thing. Really, really, really has to be a good thing because you compare Traore to the rest. This is clearly a positive development, and no one could tell you. Certainly, no one would tell Malcolm any differently. So that's serious. That's clearly a positive development, which is why so many people are rallying around him. One of the things that Malcolm said is a quote I use in the book, certainly, where Malcolm says, look, the way we should judge African leaders is if the West are praising those African leaders, we should be wary of them. And the ones they vilify, the ones they say are dictators, the ones they say that we should be afraid of, those are the ones we should rally to. It's in the way that Traore is portrayed in the West. It's not good, right? They kind of put him out there. He's authoritarian, anti-democracy, cracking down on opponents, etc., etc. You get this. This is a bad dictator in Africa. That's what they're giving you with Traore. So again, West don't like him. We should like him. This is all positive. And just to stress on the democracy front, democracy is complete and utter hypocrisy. So one of the things you can certainly say with Traore is it's a military coup. Military took over. There's not free elections, etc. That is not a way to judge a country. Just straight up, the idea that the way you judge a country is if they have free elections or not, and that should be the way you judge the country, completely nonsensical. The way you should judge a country is does it provide for its people? You can never be free if you're in abject poverty. No matter where you can vote for somebody. That's ridiculous. That's completely nonsensical. Right? The problem with the African continent is that people don't control the resources, and the resources don't come back to them. Right? So if you have an economy where you don't control your resources, but you have elections, guess what? You're not free. And if you have an economy where you don't have elections, but you do control your resources and they do come back to you, you're going to be free. Right? This is a complete Western myth, nonsensical myth that democracy is how you judge the state. Nonsense. We're supposed to have democracy in the UK. There ain't no democracy. There's two parties you can vote for. What kind of democracy is that? And they all say the same thing. America the same way. You got Trump. The reason you got Trump because there's two people to vote for, and they basically say the same thing. There's no democracy. It's a joke. That's a show. That's a sham. That's what's about Malcolm's show? Controlled show. Flim flam. That's Hollywood production. So let's just take any critique that says, well, there's no democracy is nonsensical as a critique. Are the people being fed? Is the country? That's freedom. That's the question, right? So if you take that, and I say that for a reason, because there's another question that's come up. I don't know, say every single event, but definitely come up at a majority of the events I've spoken to, and has caused some discord with people when I'm talking to people who are generally like, yeah, we love the book, we love Malcolm, da 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 da. But if you read certainly the last book, Psychosis of Whiteness, and heard me talk about things generally, you will know that Nelson Mandela, your hero, I say your hero, but many people's hero is nobody. It should not be our hero, right? And it's actually a really interesting contrast to somewhere like Burkina Faso and where it could go, and somewhere like South Africa, which South Africa has democracy, right? There's a vote. You can vote for the ANC, who give you nothing every single time, by the way. But anyway, you can vote, but the resources aren't controlled by the people, right? South Africa is a place where liberal democracy, blah blah blah, but the money goes out. The money goes to the whites. Just again, sorry, I'm gonna go on a little tangent here because we're hearing about all this white genocide nonsense. Hearing about white poverty in South Africa. You only need one statistic for this. Less than 1% of the white South African population is below the poverty line in South Africa, and more than 50% of the black population in South Africa is below the poverty line. And it's a poverty line that we in the West cannot understand. Take away all your nonsense about white people losing out in South Africa, white genocide. Utterly ridiculous. The money in South Africa goes to the whites, and it goes to overseas white people, goes to the West, except that's where it goes in China now, probably increasingly, and doesn't come to the people. So you can vote, but you haven't got nothing. Compare that to the policies of Traore in his early days. So I ain't going to praise too much, but it's early days. But nationalizing the mining production, starting a national gold mine, those kind of things are the things you want to do to give your country the resources, right? Number one thing that Africa has is, for the meantime, mineral wealth, which is more than all of it is almost controlled by Chinese, Europe, America, elsewhere, etc., etc., etc. So the most important policy I'm looking at from Traore is that nationalization, that government stake in all of the work, right? And he's going to be challenged on this, and you're going to see this go through the courts completely because they hate this. That's what if Africa starts to control its mineral resource, Africa becomes the richest part of the world. So we look at that policy. That's the direction. That's revolutionary politics. Compare that to South Africa. You can vote, but you ain't got no money. Great, good for you. Which one do you think you're going to be freer in? The place where you can vote for nothing, or the place where you can eat? I don't know. Probably going to be probably a relatively simple discussion, right? And again, thinking about Mandela, because Mandela again comes in for significant criticism in the book, is what was Malcolm? How did Malcolm judge politicians? He said, look, those people that the West love, we should be wary of. And is there any African politician that the West love more than Nelson Mandela? Remember when Nelson Mandela went to prison, they didn't like him. Nelson Mandela went to prison, started Umkhonto Sizwe, the armed wing of ANC, was blowing things up. Went to prison, hated him, terrorist, hang Mandela, couldn't stand him, etc. But Mandela himself, just all you have to do is go read the last bit of Long Walk to Freedom. I know Long Walk to Freedom is a long book, but please get to the end. Because I think many of you didn't get to the end. Because I was surprised where the man just tells you in the book how he sold out the struggle. He literally there's no hiding from it. There's no pretense. You read that bit, he's basically telling you, I sold out the struggle. Doesn't even end the last, I think it's about a year, but don't quote me on this. Doesn't even end the last portion of his period in prison. He's in house arrest with his family because he's by himself negotiating with the apartheid leaders to end apartheid in a way that gives the whites all the power and control. Man sold out, I'm sorry. No doubt, question about it, the man sold out. And don't come here talking about, well, we can't judge people with that. It's a difficult situation, blah, blah, blah. There were many people in Africa who didn't want to sell out. Chris Hani didn't want to sell out. You don't know who Chris Hani is because they got rid of him, right? Like, come on. Man sold out. Maybe he had good reason to sell out, but he sold out. And then after you look at that transition that Mandela's part of, white government, he shares the presidency with the clerk. Shares the presidency with the clerk. It's all just shake hands with Afrikaners. Let's bring everybody in. Let's talk about the rainbow nation. It's not a rainbow. Hey, white isn't even in the rainbow. Let's be pointing this out. There ain't no white in the rainbow. So this don't even make sense as a concept. Unless I'm missing something. Red, yellow, pink and green, orange, purple and blue. Ain't no white. And guess what? Ain't no black in the rainbow either. What kind of a nonsense is this? We got a metaphor for a country that doesn't have the two most important colors. Anyway, South Africa. So we think about someone like Mandela. It's important. And it's important in this Traore conversation, right? Because you have the Mandela, the person who sells out, the person who gives you this transition in South Africa to a place that could have had a revolution, that needed a revolution, that was on a precipice of a revolution, and then completely and utterly capitulated and sold out, which is why you have this stat today where 50% of the black population in a black majority country with a supposedly black government in the richest country in Africa by money at least, 50% of the black population live in abject poverty. 20,000 murders a year. You're talking about white genocide. Apparently, I read the most, what was I heard this other day? The high estimate of the number of Afrikaner farmers killed since apartheid is 3,000. That might sound like a lot, but South Africa has about 20,000 murders a year, every year since apartheid. So, apartheid was 92, that's 30 plus years. That's a lot of people. That's hundreds of that. That's how many? You take 10 years, 20,000, 200,000, that's like 600,000 murders. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but that's a lot of murders. 90 or plus percent of them are black people. And we're talking about white genocide. Psychosis of whiteness. That's what that is. Psychosis of whiteness and nothing short. So I had to put this little bit in about Mandela because people just look. All I say to that is, you want to come and say, well, no, look at Mandela. Read the last bit of Long Walk to Freedom. Look at what happened. Then come talk to me because I need to know. And I think I might have said this on the pod before, but I definitely said it in the book. It's Psychosis of Whiteness. I couldn't believe how bad it was. I think I did do this on the pod, so I'm just going to do this briefly. Orania in South Africa. Orania is all white settlement, all Afrikaner settlement. I went there a few years ago. It is like a Nazi village. Like if you could imagine what a Nazi village would look like, it would be like this. There is propaganda everywhere just for the whites. Awful place. Betsy Verwoerd, the wife of Hendrik Verwoerd, the architect of apartheid, lived there, right? Had a whole place there. So basically, there's a shrine there. Now she's dead. All you need to know about Mandela is Mandela, when he was president, first black president, apparently, flew in there in a helicopter to sit down and have tea with Betsy Verwoerd. Malcolm would have, if there is any politician on this earth that Malcolm would have been the most disgusted with, it is Mandela. Remember, Malcolm had, it was all, firstly, think about Malcolm's politics, it was about us. It wasn't about white people, it was always about us primarily. What are we doing? What's the problem with us? And so, yeah, he cost a white man, white devils, but actually, the object of his ire were the black people to taking us down the wrong way, right? And it wasn't really even those ones. The Shombi got a lot of stuff because the Congo, because he murdered Lumumba, obviously. But typically, in like, he wasn't really on the right. This whole boon of cooning black people is a new thing, relatively new part. So he wasn't that many back in the day. But certainly Malcolm would diss him a little bit. But he focused more on those people who had influence, right? The Kings, Martin Luther King, main person called Uncle Tom. Those are the people because they take us around the wrong way. Nelson Mandela, given his popularity, one of my earliest memories as a child, maybe the earliest, that's certainly one of the earliest memories as a child, is a free Mandela rally we went to in Birmingham. It's like, must have been like 90s or something. I was about 6, something like that. Clearly remember going, right? People, even now, like I said, I'm just telling the truth. There's no other way to put this about Mandela. There's no possible thing you could really say if you actually, which is positive about Mandela from a revolutionary perspective. People still get upset. These are the people Malcolm will be coming at because they're leading you astray. If you think Nelson Mandela South Africa is a positive thing, then you have lost your mind as a black person. I am sorry to say that. That's just the reality of it. No, there's no, what do the kids say? No cap, right? You can have a debate about pragmatic and but the reality of it, what it's led to, is one of the worst situations that black people find themselves in the world. South Africa is on the edge of explosion because of that legacy of Mandela. That's the legacy of Mandela. And we want to be celebrating? Nah, man. No. Malcolm would be, oh, good. That Uncle Tom, that Malcolm would have called him the definition of Uncle Tom. No doubt about it. Mark that down, right? You take everything he said. What is an Uncle Tom? Someone who leads black people astray, who has the support of black people. And I can't think of anybody historically in the last 20, 30 years, 40 years, has had the support of black people like Mandela and still does have, right? Mass support. All right. But leading us astray. You can see what happened. Astray. No doubt about it. Objectively true. Mandela South Africa is a disaster for black people. Right? There's no argument against it. And then who is it? He said, the first thing I said earlier, those that the West love, we should be against. And I can't think of anybody they love more than Uncle Mandela. All right? They got plinths. What did they put him on a plinth in Trafalgar Square? And you think that's a river? You think that's what we should be looking up to? I don't know what to say. Honestly, I'm just like, yo. That's, if you want to pick a figure Malcolm would have been costing, that would have been the figure. That's why in the film, there's a bit where I'm talking to, in fact, I should have saved this Mandela bit for the intro to Jared, because me and Jared Bull had this whole thing about Mandela on there, because Mandela is the one that Spike Lee picks to end the film, the Malcolm X film. No, no, that should not happen. Anyway, back to Traore, because that's actually one focused on Traore, but Traore is clearly not in the Mandela mold, right? Economic policy, very, very different. Rhetorically, very, very different. Clearly doesn't have a support of the West, and in fact, probably going to be killed by the West, right? Because of not just him, but also Mali and Niger. You start to link countries together. That's when we have the solution. That's when we start to have a revolutionary solution. So certainly, again, you can see why people are positive about Traore. It's clearly a positive step in the positive direction. But, and I say it's a but because we always have to put a but on there. There's 2 buts I'll say to the Traore thing. One of them is very, 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 very much connected, linked to Russia, and this is a problem. Not because Russia's no worse than the EU or America. This is not an anti-communist. Russia ain't no bogeyman more than anyone else. But Pan-Africanism, revolutionary Pan-Africanism, relies on us being independent. Relies on us building Africa. And you don't need Russia. You don't need Europe. You don't need none of them. You don't need China. Africa. And it seems like, and I'm saying seems like, because I would say I am not an expert on Traore or the Sahel in any way, shape, or form. But definitely that specter of Russia hanging over it seems like a problem. But again, Malcolm always said short range program, long range program. And in the short range, if you can get things from Russia that can open up, get us to a place where we need to go, that's a short range program. Then that's fine, right? Lumumba. Actually, go back to Lumumba. Lumumba was one of the reasons the West wanted to kill him is because Lumumba was going to the Soviets, right? We said, as you know, Soviet support, they're going to give us stuff you're not going to give us, and they didn't want to support the Soviets, so that's one of the reasons they got rid of him. So that isn't necessarily a damning thing; it's just a thing, right? So, but it's something to be wary of, because real revolutionary Pan-Africanism is about Africa and only Africa. So if there's but certainly the condition of which we are in at the moment, it would be impossible tomorrow, today, or next week to say we're just going to kick everybody out. This can't do it, right? Because the mines are owned by mostly other countries. The infrastructure is owned by mostly other countries. So can you play them off each other? Can you get stuff from Russia? Maybe if that's the program, that's a positive program. But again, it's just something to be wary of, because what you definitely don't want to do, what we definitely don't want to do, is just say, look, this is it's all good. Nothing's ever all good. That's the reality. Nothing is ever all good, and we have to be wary and see where that goes. Second thing, more important thing actually than the Russia thing. This is partly part 1A and part 2 to this. What Malcolm would say on this is, and I have been saying this a lot at the events, and I think I mentioned it last week. The worst thing we can do is look for a black messiah. So J. Edgar Hoover, who apparently had African ancestry, and maybe why he was so anti-black, he's trying to hide it. Said they were trying to stop the rise of a black messiah. All right, someone is going to save us. That's why they was going after people, killing the people, chopping the head off. And what we should have learned from history is that we have been far too dependent on this idea of the black messiah, of the black person's going to save us. So when Malcolm gets killed, OAU drops. King gets killed. Actually, King gets killed. This is one actually when King got killed, he carried on civil rights. We didn't actually stop it. All right, carried on civil rights. That's probably a organizationally a better example. This is actually the civil rights movement was carried on regardless of King. But certainly radical politics, you lose leaders like Lumumba. What's happened to Congo? You lose leaders like Ghana, like Nkrumah, who's deposed in Ghana. What happens to Ghana? Neocolonialism. So tends to happen generally is that we have these people who put lots of faith in those people. Those people disappoint. Mandela's a good example, put a lot of faith, didn't die, just disappointed us. and what happened, right? And so we actually don't need the Messiah. What we need is organization. What we don't need is a Messiah. What we need is organization. What we need is to build things which are beyond that one person, and then it can sustain when that one person either lets us down or is killed, right? Because the reality is, the firm reality is that if Traore is on the right track, they're going to kill him. Like, we know they already tried to kill him, and they're going to kill him. That's what they do. This is the most violent system that has ever existed in history. They are going to kill him. And the question is, two questions. One, at this point, there is absolutely nothing we can do as black people to prevent Traore being murdered. Not one solitary. You can do a march in London. You can do a march in America. You can do a march if you want to do a march. It's not going to kill him. It's not going to do anything. There's no organizational capacity, structural capacity to do anything to prevent that from happening. So the question Malcolm says, so what are we doing? Why have we not created organization 60 years since he died? Why are we so backwards, or much further back organizationally than we were then? Right? So there's nothing we can do. So that's the question, is what do we do? The practical thing we can do is build an organization that can protect people like Traore. And along that same line, I stress to you again, nobody can give you freedom. Nobody. Not Malcolm X. And definitely not Ibrahim Traore. He ain't giving you freedom. He can do there's a part he has to play, and we have to play our own part. And what we often do, we do it all the time. We do it with people like Malcolm, we do it with people like Garvey, we look, and then they got, we're gonna put all the effort. That's the problem with the Black Messiah. You're looking for someone to save you. This ain't religion. Like this ain't religion like that. We can't be waiting for someone to come along to save us. We have to save ourselves. So that ties back into organization, right? If we don't have, why we should be building the things that we need, one, to protect people like Traore, but two, to support that work, right? What are we doing in the UK? Just build an organization, build the capacity to be together, build that international cooperation so we have the power collectively. It is the collective of us that will save us. That's our power, not in leaders. Leaders are useful, leaders are positive, leaders are good, but that model don't work. Can't work for revolution, can't work for nothing. And in fact, I'm just thinking off the fly on this, but the reason that civil rights worked so well after King died is because actually King was really just a spokesperson, right? He's the one that gave speeches. But behind the scenes, I think I've said it before in the pod, Ella Baker is the most important person in the civil rights movement. Ella Baker is the one who's putting together the grassroots organizing campaigns, etc. If you look at the civil rights movement, there's the big 6 organizations, there's lots of other small organizations. They're all working, building together, moving together. King just a spokesperson. It's not the leader, that is a spokesperson. We remember. But so when he dies, it carries on. Now, when we talk about revolutionary politics, there is no organization. What's the organization? What's the framework? What's the movement? Don't exist. And so that's why when Traore is killed, and more than likely he will be killed, that is what happens, the thing will collapse because we don't have the structural organization to build it. So I always say, it's not romantic, right? It's not in the big speeches and in the imagery and in the that's not revolution. Revolution is the nitty gritty, it's the mundane, it's the organization building that we don't have. That's what it is. And until we do have that, A, we can't protect people like Traore. B, we can't support that movement. Can't do it. So, of course, we support Traore. Of course, you say this is a positive development. We have an African leader who is young, first, because that's another thing. These old, stay too long African leaders, who's standing up, at least targeting to the West, has some very solid economic policy. You see that region in the Sahel fighting back. Also, again, just the French, if not coincident, these are French colonies, former French colonies, because France has been the wolf. I said last week about the wolf. France has been the wolf on the continent. And so, controlling monetary policy, troops in the region. So people can see the wolf and they fight back. It's part of the reason why the people rose up. Whereas Britain tend to be a bit more hands off. People aren't fighting back. Wolf and the fox. Wolf has kind of been, Britain's been the fox since the end of colonialism. In colonialism, they were the wolf. Since colonialism, they've been the fox. And so that's why you haven't seen that same uprising, because it's harder to uprise when you don't have the fox. That should be the reminder. It's all bad. Fox, wolf, it's all going to get eaten either way. And we need to resist. But the biggest thing for all of this, I would say, if you care about Traore, if you're saying that we need to support Traore, only way to do that is organization. And what are we doing here? Rambi, organization, and Black Unity. Convention for African people, which will be in Gambia in 2026. The whole point of this is to bring together organizations, bring together those who are interested, to create a body that can support us, that can represent our interests, that can protect and support the work that is happening. That is your responsibility. That is our responsibility. That is where we need to be seeing our role in this, right? We're not separate to the work of Traore. It should be the same thing. Different place, but same thing. And that's what we have to stop. And again, writing a book about Malcolm, we say Malcolm, probably not the best strategy to stop messiahing people, but that's not the point. The point why I'm writing about Malcolm is Malcolm gives us the framework to do this work, right? It really does. Says, look, this is what it looks like. This is the blueprint. And if we organize collectively, then we can actually build a world where people like Traore can survive. We can support that work. We can build the revolutionary future. But we have to believe it, and we have to be prepared to organize to do it. And that's what it is. Organize. Garvey always said the greatest weapon used against the Negro is disorganization. All right, so I'm going to start ranting. That was my long rant about African leaders, etc. It ties in really well, though, talking to George the Poet. For George, especially, do check out our old podcast we did with George as well. We spoke about Obama. Obama comes up, I think, in this one as well. But yeah, this is the whole interview that we did with George the Poet after the break in LSE in the Old Theatre for the documentary Nobody Can Give You Freedom. Please do check out the documentary. Please do watch, share, like, subscribe, everything. But I hope you enjoy the full interview with George the Poet. Check out his book, Track Record, as well. Check out his work. And again, once again, thank you for listening and thank you for watching. Revolution knows no compromise. All right, thank you so much for doing this.
It's a pleasure, bro.
What's it like? So this is the place Malcolm gave one of his last recorded speeches only 11 days before he died.
Yeah.
What's it like being in the space?
Yeah, it's amazing. Malcolm's one of them people that has touched so many different spaces. And you might come into a space with your own preconceptions. It's LSE, it's what, as I'm walking through the building, I'm having all these thoughts about the legacy and the heritage of LSE. But to understand how Malcolm applied his thinking to all these spaces, it's just a reminder of our responsibility to show up and do the work regardless of where we are. Yeah, it's one thing with Malcolm is so much about black people, but 60 years ago in this building, it would have been all packed full of white people. Come on, man, yeah, there would have been a one brown face from the, imperial peripheries. But yeah, he would have been speaking truth to power anywhere.
But is that important? Because your work as well, you're big, right? BBC, Voices, obviously you have a black audience, but it's not just for black people. So how is it important to get those messages, or why is it important to get those messages to others as well?
Yeah, no, it's very important. We are where we are, you know what I mean? We are in the imperial court. And there is a level of, as well as there is the responsibility of truth telling and presenting research and analysis, there's also straight politics.
Yeah.
And I was listening to Malcolm's speech earlier where he reflected on an airplane flight that he was on to Algeria. Are you familiar with it? Where he's in between two white passengers and the woman is asking him, what does the X on your briefcase stand for? X. What does the M stand for? Malcolm. She's like, are you Malcolm X? And he was like, yeah, she was expecting me to be very different.
Yeah, looking for the horns.
Yeah, she was looking for the horns, etc. But no, at the end of the day, we need to present ourselves on a human level, and we need to speak as clearly as possible to as many people as possible.
Yeah. How is Malcolm someone that's influenced you personally?
Malcolm was is my number one North Star in that respect.
Okay.
You know, there have been times in my life where I have just I bought into the propaganda around Malcolm, not in a way that I didn't like him. I just thought his image was as simple as some of the mainstream portrayals of him were, innit?
Yeah. What's the propaganda? Tell us a bit about it.
The propaganda is that Malcolm X is an American story, of an angry individual who is misguided and reformed out of his misguided activism. I mean, you know, there's all this propaganda around the militancy, like he was made to seem like violence was his unique angle, you know, that was his only contribution. Embracing violence where, you know, it's never framed as counter-violence or revolutionary, you know, preparedness for militant action. But yeah, more importantly, the cutting off of Malcolm from his international context. I think that's one of the greatest tricks the devil ever played.
Yeah, that's actually what he was talking about. Because there may have been a couple of black people in the audience, because it was the African student organization here. They invited him, and he really did speak very much. The last year of his life, it was the international. So can you explain why, you know, you're younger than me, so.
Am I?
I think so, you must be younger than me.
You just look like such a young man. I was like,
people say the opposite there, which is how you know you're getting older. but you know, you're born decades after Malcolm, thousands of miles away. Why should Malcolm, who was mostly in America, resonate with you today?
Malcolm was a true internationalist at the end of his life. I mean, even while he was under the Nation of Islam, he was searching. You know, he spent a lot of 1959 in Sudan, I believe. And, you know, from there on, learning more about the Muslim world, you know, touring West Asia and even West Africa, the Muslim communities in West Africa. I myself am not Muslim, but I can appreciate how someone who started off in what was essentially a sect or a cult, pushing themselves to get the full context, you know, across different continents. In the last year of Malcolm's life, you can hear how disturbed he was about how the political situation in the Congo played out. You can hear him making conscious efforts to tie it to the situation in was it Indochina? Vietnam. Talking about, you know, trying to educate the lay Black American audience on, you know, the full context of the Chinese Revolution, etc. So Malcolm was always taking on this task of making the Black American struggle directly interface with the global anti-imperial struggle. Yeah.
And as someone I guess one of the pushbacks I get talking about Malcolm, and Malcolm's my favorite, obviously, is do we need British figures? You know, we don't learn much about black people in Britain. So should we be focusing so much on an American figure?
And I feel like that misses the point. I feel like that critique really misses the point. There is a commonality, there's a common challenge when it comes to anti-imperial struggle and there is a need to swap notes. There is a need to understand the shared responsibility we have to each other beyond national borders. Malcolm in his talks would directly, you know, like when he would talk about the situation in Congo, and he would try and get the audience to understand. He'd be like, imagine them dropping bombs on these Congolese. They look just like you. You look as Congolese as a Congolese, you know, and try to make them feel an emotional connection to the horrors being inflicted on people around the world as parallel and imminent danger in the same way, you know, as what they were immediately facing in much of Black America.
Yeah. So you think Malcolm is relevant to Africa too?
100% Malcolm was relevant to Africa. Malcolm overtly made Africa his business, and when he was received in Africa, he was acknowledged as basically an ambassador of Black America.
Yeah. Yeah.
He took models and he took organizational references from Africa, and you know, eventually Organization of African American Unity was inspired directly by the Organization of African Unity, as I understand it.
Yeah, he spoke to Kwame Nkrumah, came back and was like, let's connect these struggles up together.
Straight.
It's someone who saw those two things.
100%. And what even strikes me is that when you look at the so-called decolonial struggle of Africa, you know, there were like basically two camps. People on either side both at least paid lip service to Malcolm and at least wanted to be seen as embracing Malcolm's struggle and this new internationalism, which is funny when you think about how some of these struggles played out and how a lot of the people that were embracing Malcolm turned out to be hypocrites and double agents. Yeah. But they recognized the importance of this ambassador.
Yeah. Why was he so important then?
He made it plain.
Yeah.
Malcolm made it undeniable. He had a talent, you know, he had a commonality, and he had a proven resilience. His personal track record spoke volumes. So by the time he's meeting the Minister of Finance in the Saudi Kingdom, or Ezekiel and Nkrumah and Nasser across the African continent, he's standing on his own character. By that time, he was broken off from the Nation of Islam when he made a lot of these international connections. So he had no daddy to fall back on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He was there on the strength of his own character, and he could take the fundamentals of people's political struggles, and he could just make it obvious how we were all in the same boat.
Yeah. Yeah, that Make It Plain, that's what our podcast is, Make It Plain, everything's Make It Plain, because of how we cut through, just really, this is clear from Malcolm, it just makes sense. When was the first time you came across Malcolm X?
I actually don't remember. I don't remember like how old I was. That's how long Malcolm X or an awareness of Malcolm X has been in my life. It was the movie. It was the Spike Lee movie first. And that's what I mean about like me buying into propagandistic portrayals of Malcolm for years. You know, that was all I knew, and already I was sold. Yeah. I was sold about the idea of organizing the working class. Because my situation, I was in a predominantly Black working class community growing up, and there didn't seem to be the unity that I dreamt of. And when I saw the Malcolm X movie, I was like, that's what I want to be. I want to be someone that people feel safe to gather around and set their differences aside in conjunction with. So it was the movie, and then obviously I read the book, the autobiography. And,
I actually have the autobiography. I bought a copy of the autobiography of Malcolm X.
I know you did it. I mean, it's a nice picture.
It's a great picture, though.
Great.
It's a good read. The good read. It's entertaining
book. Yeah. Very Hollywood.
Very Hollywood.
Yeah.
The film is interesting because the film got a lot of criticism. In fact, Kwame Traore, he used to be Stokely Carmichael, he said Spike Lee making that film would be like a Zionist making a film about Yasser Arafat, and just rubbished it and said, "Look, what is this?"
I didn't hear that, but I heard a lot of Kwame Traore's referencing of the film, but again, like, this is why I'm so appreciative that you're doing this work now, because there are just huge gaps in the public conversation about Malcolm in this part of the world. You have to get into circles where people have been thinking and working and reading about this for years before you can have a normal, factual conversation about Malcolm.
Yeah.
But yeah, that movie is probably still most people's understanding of him.
But it's powerful though, right? The book, the movie, it's definitely done something. It's made Malcolm, it's attracted a lot of people to Malcolm.
It recruited me to Malcolm,
Yeah.
definitely.
So it can't all be bad.
No, I mean, yeah. I mean, to be honest, we all have a responsibility to continue to do the work. You know what I mean? We have to continue to analyze and continue to map existing analyses onto the ever-changing situation on the ground. So if we're not doing that, we can't begrudge, the Hollywood and the, storytelling industrial complex for doing what it does.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big emphasis of me writing the book and making this film is to debunk the myths that come from the autobiography. And one thing I was going to ask you to do is Organization Afro-American Unity, as we discussed. Is it in the book? Like, if you skipped even to the index, can you find it in there?
Where would I expect to find it? Last few chapters?
I mean, this is 1960. He's writing this book in 64, 65. This is at the same time organization.
It would have been in the intro then.
It would, right? Like, he's actually doing this work at the same time as interviews for this book. And can you find any reference to it in the? Because I got the book and I was skimming through the index to see whether I could find it.
Have I found it?
Oh no, it's there. Look, it is there. I was wrong. It is there. Look, 41, 42. It comes up, all right? So we do have references to organization.
Yeah.
Which is surprising reading back. I think because I don't remember it at all.
I wonder what happened there because I don't remember it.
I don't remember it. Imagine that. I listened to the book recently, actually. Read the book recently. I don't remember it at all. But apparently it's in there. So I take it back. It's in the book. But it definitely doesn't feature prominently.
That's a new edition anyway, man. I know they've re-released them classics. I'm curious because I don't remember that from my reading. Interesting.
Yeah, but part of that is like so with the work that he's doing, organization, he is, really trying to set. This is what Malcolm wants to set up. It's very much about, like I said, international. But that message has been lost a lot, and particularly in America. All right, so one of you did a poem about Black America recently, because Black America can be a bit, what's the word we use? Isolated sometimes.
Right. The rhetoric that comes out of it anyway can come from a disconnected place, as we can all fall into that trap, and America's got a lot of water either side of it, so maybe that plays into it, and it's a big place with a lot of complex history. But I did write a poem ahead of the last election, the last US presidential election, and a huge chunk of that poem was directly addressing Black America, and it was just making the case for internationalism.
Yeah.
I had to sit, I talked to my peoples about it for time, I want to make a poem. I was thinking of initially tying it in with the Kendrick and Drake beef, because I wanted to talk about why that beef was disappointing to me at a time where so much was going on in the world, and I felt that hip hop had drawn a line in the sand of what it is prepared to deal with and what it's not, and what is seen as exciting and avant-garde at a time where it is on. I talked to you about Kendrick last time. But I eventually landed on that. That's going to be too much. Let me just go back to basics and make the case that I express interest in you lot's politics because I come from an internationalist school of thought, an internationalist tradition. And before you attack me, so did your OGs. If we can all agree on Malcolm's importance, then we should probably return to some of his core principles.
Yeah, I mean, but that seems like something that's not happening. So American descendants of slavery, ADOS, or foundational Black Americans, FBA, seems like they're really saying, look, there's something particular about being African American, and if you're not African American, then you're not part of the club.
Yeah. And I think I was mentioning to you earlier how, I sympathize. I had a few lines about FBA and ADOS in my book as an example of where the consciousness gets corrupted and mutated. But I do sympathize. There is a very particular experience, and as Malcolm articulated, it's basically a colonial experience where so much of their truth is warped and resold back to them in a harmful, poisonous way.
Yeah.
But to say that in defense of who we are going to cut ourselves off from the rest of the African world, and we are planting our flag, we are claiming our stake in this American project. It's just the antithesis of Malcolm. It's the anti-Malcolm.
It is, right?
Yeah.
The Malcolm will tell you, you're not an American.
Yeah.
But it seems like they really, really want to be American.
Right. So you just got to denounce Malcolm if you want to be on that. Just be clear.
But this is the thing, I've heard people be ADOS and still embrace Malcolm. Right? Because in fact, I actually was on a call and somebody made the case that because the organization Afro-American Unity had Afro-American in it, it was just American. And we should actually stop talking about Malcolm's Caribbean mother, because that doesn't really matter.
You know what, man?
He's an American figure.
Listen, man, as crazy as that is and as ridiculous and easy to dismiss as it is, I just, it's a reminder. It serves as a reminder of everything that is taken from black people in the colonial context, especially in Black America. Everything that is, all the ways that they're gaslit and told that their history is not real, is not as they imagine it. And now we have a generation where the efforts to suppress real consciousness, real African consciousness have just been so apparently successful that people are just mad. People just say stuff that's mad.
Yeah, a lot of it comes to reparations, because there is a big reparations push. Malcolm argued heavily for reparations, but now it seems like because reparations is on the agenda, they just want reparations for African Americans, whatever that means. And it can't include Caribbeans, it can't include Africans, it has to include those on the soil.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a reminder of all the manipulations come to bear.
Yeah. I mean, is there something unique about African Americans' experience?
I mean, I do believe that all our experiences are unique to the geographies that we end up in. You know, I don't subscribe in the ADOS sense. You know, I feel like what they are really pushing for is a pass to not have to take on all this anti-colonial baggage, because that's hard. You know what I mean? It's easy to say, but my side is winning, and we're the black people that are with the hegemon. So we should be the hegemon of black people. It's kind of easy to say that, and it's obviously two-faced and cowardly and ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, we all have specificities of our geographic experience, but no one is untouched by the colonial reality that endures today, as much of your work has helped me understand.
Yeah, I wonder to what extent people, African Americans, or generally, see it as a colonial project. But that does come back to the question of, we talked about this before, like places like the Caribbean, Jamaica. Is it that different? Like, my family's Jamaican, but that's a prison colony, right? We like to, because we supposedly have independence, we like to wave a flag and say culture, but it's no more authentic than African America. But we embrace it like it is. Is that part of the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I know where you stand on this, so I'm always processing your perspective.
What's your perspective, though?
I recognize that people have been there for 400 years, and to not acknowledge what has been uniquely created by their ancestry in that time feels like a denial of an important part of the struggle. You feel me? I would love for everyone to identify as African and to locate their priorities in rebuilding an African something, you know, but it's, for some people, I think that's just literally unfathomable.
No, literally unfathomable. I believe it, I know it's unfathomable. but my thing is, you can keep the culture. Like, look, everything, Nanny, Garvey, like, there's a whole rich, but you don't have to keep the country. Like, you can keep that heritage, but just say we're African.
What does that look like? Like, Jamaica, because you know the slogan, out of many.
One people, that's too bad propaganda. How many more people than nurses? Come on.
So like, what in maybe even in the tradition of Malcolm,
Yeah.
what do you envision for places like Jamaica?
I mean, realistically, who's Malcolm's biggest influence is Marcus Garvey, Garvey movement. Garvey's a Jamaican hero.
Come on.
What did Garvey say? Back to Africa. Like, and fundamentally, you look at someone like the Caribbean, look at someone like Jamaica, it don't work economically. Plus climate change. Realistically, that's actually probably, if I want to say, like, what's that long-term project? And Malcolm was really good at having short-term goals, long-term goals. Long range, it's back to Africa, honestly. But we get stuck in this national box.
Yeah.
And what I'd say is ADOS is no different than Jamaican nationalism, Brand Jamaica, Build Jamaica. They're dead ends, both of them. And I think Malcolm would say the same thing.
Yeah, I hear it. But again, that takes a level of political imagination.
Yeah, that's maybe that. That's maybe that. People are not ready for.
Yeah. But that's where I feel like that's part of the reason I ended up in poetry.
Okay, yeah.
It's important to work on people's imagination.
Yeah. But also, I wouldn't say Africa's the same though. Like, we're talking like Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, those are made up by Europe. Like these national boundaries that we have, why do we embrace them when they're not? None of them were created by us.
And what it would take to get people to rethink it is what the Organization of African Unity and Afro-American Unity were intended to do. What Kwame Nkrumah was trying to do.
Yeah.
A long-term pivot away from this idea that we can't form anything outside of the imperial reality.
Yeah. What was it that made Malcolm X radical? Because you've written about radicalism, black radicalism. What made him radical?
I think Malcolm X's commitment to getting to the root of the problem, as he put it in his own words, that's what radicalism is. You know, are we going to tamper with the cosmetics of change, identity, justice, or are we going to really call a thing what it is?
Yeah.
And are we going to unwaveringly confront the evil and injustice of that thing?
Yeah.
And Malcolm's voice just resonated. Just on the way over here, I was listening to some Malcolm, and I was thinking, I need to protect all the recordings I have of Malcolm and ensure that they stay in my family, because it wouldn't surprise me if his digital memory or digital footprint started to disappear, because his voice, that's his spirit that endures. And when you hear his arguments in his voice, it's undeniable.
Yeah. And he's funny as well.
Just
underrated funny.
Funny. You're making me laugh. He was telling a story, like again in that story about the white people asking him what his name was and stuff. He was like just explaining how when the white man in America calls himself white, it's different from the white man in his experience of the Muslim world. He's like, white man in America says white, he means he's boss. Yeah. You know, he's boss. He's your friend. He took your language away from you. But even his little subtleties in the way he used language and just little metaphors that he would spin. He was an early hip-hop legend.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because you said Malcolm makes it plain. That must be something that's, you know, you went to university, you went to Cambridge, didn't you?
Yeah, I went to Cambridge.
You're a spoken word artist. You're not in that academic, like you could have gone down a different route in it, but you do very much work that's for the public. So I guess how much is that inspiration to keep it plain, make it plain, been for your work?
Yeah. One thing about Malcolm is that he was not afraid to pivot.
Yeah.
And if he felt that he was on a path that was a dead end, or he had been working with bad information, or the reference points that he was using were unreliable, he would use his own logic and he would redirect. And that's a grace that I always wanna that I wish for everyone, and I always wanna like work into my my projects and my work, my output. So it was always important for me to be able to stand on my own reasoning outside of an academy, outside of a particular school of thought, as much as I am prepared to humble myself and listen to and learn from different sources. I really follow Malcolm's example of thinking for yourself and creating a space that is that invites people to learn, grow, and act.
Yeah, which is important. And I mean, look, I'm an academic, so what can I say? Like, it's been a learning curve for me because the way that, the way you have to talk in these places and the way you talk in real life.
Yeah,
different things, right?
but you're an academic that talks plain. You know what I mean? Like very publicly. Again, on the way over here, I was thinking, like, what does LSE think about Kehinde? You know what I mean? Like, you just be out here running your mouth.
That's why I can't get a job here. Come on, man.
They let you film your little film. But yeah, it's career suicide to an extent. It's just something that is like might come with the territory for people like us.
Yeah, I do wonder though, if Malcolm was alive now, he'd probably be an academic. Like he had the intelligence, things opened up a bit. But
Saying he'll go the Angela Davis route.
Yeah, would he be Malcolm, knowing it? If he was an academic, would he be Malcolm? Would he Professor Malcolm?
I actually feel like he would have gone the Kwame Ture route. Because Kwame, continued to contribute to Pan-African thought.
Yeah.
But just couldn't, he couldn't stay in America. He couldn't.
Yeah.
He would have to be working, in Africa somewhere.
Yeah, so you don't think he couldn't have?
I don't think he would have, no, I don't think he would have been, got a Netflix contract or something. I don't see that for Malcolm X, no.
I heard, somebody told me, what's the guy's name? Gus Newport, who was Gus Newport was a mayor in California and knew Malcolm. And he was trying to tell me that Malcolm, they were trying to convince Malcolm to run for Adam Clayton Powell's seat. And he probably would have won because Malcolm in Harlem was like godlike figure, so he probably could have won. And he was convinced Malcolm was thinking about it. I can't see it. I just can't see politician Malcolm X personally.
I can see Malcolm X diplomatically giving the impression that that is something that he would consider. But no, he was so clear, he was so unequivocal on what America was at the time, that I don't see him deluding himself into thinking that he could be more effective in public office. He would have probably seen that as a buyout. Yeah,
because that is one of the myths we want to cover is, Malcolm becomes more like Martin Luther King, becoming a civil rights leader, and Malcolm, for me, he's the biggest critic. For me, he's the biggest critic of the civil rights movement you can ever find. And there's nothing that says they would come together. Because he didn't believe that America was, it can't be fixed. It's not broken, right? America does what it does.
So what is it that people try and co-opt his pivot to like a broad church, non-racialist?
So you got people, because he'd worked with civil rights leaders after he left the Nation of Islam. The logic is he becomes, Sunni Islam. He says sorry to white people. He's going to work with King. He's going to become part of the mainstream civil rights movement.
That's why you got to listen to him for yourself, man.
You
got to listen to everything he said from 1964 up to the end. And you can reach your own conclusion about what direction he was headed in. Because for me, he was constantly evoking the Mau Mau rebellion. He was siding with the Viet Cong. He was, building international links with a very specific strategy in mind. And none of that, I feel that I've also been propagandized against Martin Luther King. I feel like my understanding of Martin Luther King needs a lot of work, but Malcolm had no parallel, I don't think, in his generation.
What would be your one lasting impression? What's the kind of most important thing from Malcolm what keeps him relevant today?
What keeps Malcolm relevant? In Malcolm's time, he understood that he understood the need for internationalism, and he was ahead of his time in that respect. And decades, over half a century later, he's still ahead of his time. People still don't fully understand that or fully embrace that. people still can't see the trickery. Even when he used to talk about the March on Birmingham and the role of entertainers in the so-called black community. People still can't, fundamental truths they exposed, people still can't grasp it. And that's unfortunately what keeps him relevant.
Yeah, that's true. I always say, look, you want to understand something today, turn on a Malcolm speech. You want to see how Trump get elected? Ballot or the bullet. They tell you that right there.
Yeah. And as we were just saying about like not wanting to take credit for things that have already been said, that's one thing, you know, I speak with black people who feel energized by my poems, but have not necessarily been educated in a lot of the ways that we're talking about. And they always say to me, you know, what needs to happen? What can we do? And I'm always like to them, just read anything that was written.
Yeah.
Because I'm not going to tell you anything. Like, what we need to do has been documented and has been argued very convincingly for decades and in some cases over 100 years. But there is such a push to make it seem like at the end of Malcolm's life, there was a conclusion. At the end of Martin's life, there was a conclusion. There was a civil rights act that came out of all that struggle. There was Malcolm saying sorry to, and we are misled into thinking that there is a tidy end to this struggle that doesn't involve any compromise. When we talk about black entertainers as well, all of the rhetoric that came out post George Floyd, a lot of it was just about how can we get fairer terms within white-owned media. None of it was about, you know, none of it was even about economic justice, not really. You know what I mean? So we're still playing around at the peripheries and with the cosmetics of the problem, and scared to get deep into the root.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely walking in the legacy of Malcolm, making it plain, taking us deep to the root. So thank you for your work, I'd like to say.
Thank you for your work, bro.
Yeah.